As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then were your eyes opened?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner do such miraculous signs?" So they were divided. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you said was born blind? How is it that he now can see?" "We know our son," the parents were answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. "Give glory to God," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. But the one thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who will see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What, are we blind too?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." These are words from the Lord.
Well, good morning again. What is the situation today? Well, things are a little different. not many people are in the pews at church this morning. Might be a little different feel. And if you're watching this, it's thanks to the wonders of the internet, so welcome. Well, why are we doing all this? Well, simply put, COVID-19. Coronavirus or COVID-19 has interrupted life as we know it here, even in Louisburg. There were 25 confirmed cases and 1 death so far the other day in Johnson County with limited testing. Reported illnesses of those infected have ranged from mild symptoms to severe illness and death. What I've been repeating over and over again is that symptoms may appear from a period of 2 to 14 days after exposure. So essentially, I could contract the virus and not know it for 2 weeks. It's gotten serious enough that just north of us in Kansas City, Johnson County, Jackson County, and Wyandotte County, they're all entering mandatory lockdown periods on Tuesday. So you can go to the grocery stores, pharmacies, hardware, medical visits, dry cleaners, laundromats, banks, and all that stuff. But other than that, you're told to stay home, which is not a bad idea. In Louisburg, there's been shortages at the grocery store. Restaurants are closed for dining in. The schools are closed for the rest of the school year. It's hitting us hard. We got 2 kids in the school system. All the sports and after-school activities are canceled. The leadership here at First Christian Church as well made the decision to follow the guidelines from the government, and we canceled all our activities until at least April 1st. And I've been really conscious, because of all this, about how many times I touch my face. I don't know about you. Too many times, apparently. I want to rub my eyes right now just talking about it. I learned a new phrase this week, social distancing. I've been told by my wife many times not to go to the store, even though I want to go get something. So I don't do it. I think about my family over in the St. Louis area where my parents, brothers, and sister live. The salon that my sister works at shut down, so her source of income is gone. She's really nervous because her 9-month-old baby, my niece, could get the virus. And my dad is scheduled to have a heart procedure at the end of the month, but wonders if they're just going to cancel it because of all this stuff going on. I think it's safe to say people are nervous. Do you remember a time like this? A lot has changed and many lives have been disrupted. And because of all this, today I want to be very clear about what John 9 has to say to us. It has a lot to say, but I believe this story about Jesus healing a man born blind from birth speaks directly to our situation in at least 2 crucial ways. 2 ways I think that can change our lives and how we understand the situation. So the question has been asked a lot, how should we respond to the shutdown? I've heard, people are going to be mad if we don't have church. People are going to be mad if we have church. So either way, people are going to be mad. Doesn't matter what I do. For what I've seen, people have responded to our current situation with panic. There's been hoarding of food, toiletries, ammunition. Others by openly defying recommendations to help stop spread the disease. So I heard about a church that encouraged everyone to come. There was over 1,000 people in attendance. They're like, take that. Others have responded by washing their hands a lot, maybe even making their own hand sanitizer, which I wasn't really aware you could do. The story from John 9 seems to stick out even more today. Isn't it ironic that it's through mud and spit that someone is made clean and able to see? If today someone intentionally stuck their fingers in another person's face with mud and spit on him, we'd be like, what's wrong with you? It would be the worst. We're told not to even touch our eyes, and I tell you, it's a lot harder than it seems. All this is because when a sick person coughs or talks, it turns out virus particles can spray from their mouth or nose into another person's face and go through your eyes. Touching tears or a surface where tears have been can land to you touching your eyes and you getting sick because of that. In many ways, your eyes are a way to get sick. There's so much concern with eyes, but Jesus here is concerned with them even more. Jesus has the line at the end of our gospel reading, "For judgment I have come into this world so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind." It's an entirely different way of seeing things. Our story presents us with a stark choice. Do we see how the disciples look at the world and tragedy? They asked Jesus, "What caused this man to be born blind? Was it his sin or the sin of his parents?" That is such a karma-like thought process. Bad things happen to bad people. Good things happen to good people. That's how the world works. And so this man, known as the blind man, blind since birth, is not only known as the blind man, but as the sinner, because this is clear evidence that he or his parents have sinned. His blindness is evidence that he's being punished by God, so he turns into a theology lesson. Jesus, tell us, whose fault is this? Or do we see how Jesus looks at the world and tragedy? Quoting him, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Jesus says to them, "You're looking at this completely wrong. In fact, this isn't about sin at all. This happened so that the works of God or the glory of God might be displayed in his life." I say take a second and let that sink in. It's a totally different way of thinking. So that the works of God might be displayed in him. And he goes on to say that as long as it is day, we must do the works of the Father. It's kind of plain. Do you see how the disciples see, or how Jesus calls us to see? These are drastically different ways of seeing. This is beyond just being a pessimist or an optimist when you look at something. The glass is half full, the glass is half empty. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed. This happened so that we can do the works of the Father. Instead of playing the blame game, who is at fault? Why are things like they are? Where can I place my anger? Where can I place my frustration? What should I do? Instead, we can know that this is a time when the glory of God can be revealed. A time that the works of God might be displayed among us. This is a time when evil can be transformed through the power and love of God into what brings God glory. So I think the first point in this story really is this. The exchange between Jesus and the disciples and how everything's going to play out equips us with the vision to rightly understand and how to live in this situation. How are we to see things? How are we to live in the midst of difficulties and tragedy? Jesus says, look at it in a way so that the glory of God can be revealed in these times. So we're called to imagine, what does that look like? And if you thought that would be easy, you need to spend some time with the rest of the story about the man born blind. Well, when you read or hear the story, what hymns do you think of? I think of several. The whole world was lost in the darkness of sin. The light of the world is Jesus. You know that one? Once I was blind, but now I can see. The light of the world is Jesus. I always think of Amazing Grace, where the line, I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see, is lifted directly here from John 9. One thing I do know, the blind man says in front of everyone, I was blind, but now I see. And that seems like the pattern that's been laid down for many stories of conversions at campfires or testimonies by people at churches. Life was rough, but Jesus gave me success. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was blind, but now I can see, from disaster to security, from difficulty to easy. That this story in John 9 is the basis for these kind of conversion stories is the epitome of irony, though. I really never thought much about this until I was preparing for the message this week. Why is it ironic? Well, before his healing, The blind man was known as the blind man in his community. Hey, here's that one guy who's born blind. He's blind. He's got no credibility. He's an outcast in society and in the spiritual realm. And with this healing, it changes the narrative completely. This man isn't a sinner, or he wouldn't have been healed. He can now have the life he always wanted. Someone who evidently is not a sinner, someone who is blessed by God. Once I was blind, but now I can see, everybody. But the story doesn't stop there. After his healing, the blind man's troubles don't go away. The blind man's troubles get even worse. In the same day he gets healed, he gets kicked out of his community for telling the truth about a man named Jesus that healed him, and he's never even seen Jesus. Jesus disappears from the story. His parents won't back him up. They're too afraid. The religious leaders call him worthless and banish him. Why should we listen to you? You don't know anything. You're a sinner. Once again. Where are the hymns about that? But Jesus gets in the mud. Like God creating Adam from the earth in Genesis. And like Genesis, Jesus makes the blind man into a new creation. He opens his eyes. And then Jesus sends him out to be a light in the darkness. And it is through this man's difficulties that his story ends in worship at Jesus' feet. Shouldn't that be our story too? That's what this story is partly doing. The blind man is laid out as our pattern to follow, as one who is healed, as one who is sent by Jesus, one who returns to him in confession and worship, despite the difficulties. I think the second point, at least, is this in the story. This story and how everything plays out equips us with the pattern to rightly understand and live in this situation. Gives us a pattern. Healing, struggle, coming to worship at the feet of Jesus, regardless of what happens. I think this is important because people are afraid. They're afraid at the loss of control. They're afraid at their troubles at this time. People are afraid because they don't know what's coming next. People feel blinded by everything that's happened. What am I supposed to expect? And if Jesus came to give sight to the blind man and blinds those who think they can see, then maybe that puts us in a good place to hear the words of God today. For if the blind man is such a pattern for us, for our stories at all, let it be for what it is, for the difficult times. This guy didn't have it easy, and neither do we. A story moving from blindness to sight, of moving from seeing difficulties as a curse to difficulties as an opportunity to show the glory of God. A story about moving from difficulties to worshiping Jesus. This is a time, I think, when we're called to truly be the church among our people and our communities. We're giving the ability here with this story to see difficulties for what they truly are. Opportunities for the glory of God. Opportunities to be a light in the darkness. We're sent out to respond to the difficulties in a way that Jesus would call us to. We have the opportunity to do that right now, today. So the question we're left with, I think, and remains, is how do we see, and also, how then will we respond? Will you pray with me? Lord Jesus, strengthen us as we are challenged today. Open our eyes to see as you would have us to. Open our hearts and mind to respond in love so that we may glorify you with our lives today. Amen.